like early 20s at least, and then yeah, I don't know. It's like I grew out of it. It's so
Oh
weird.
yeah, you definitely grow out of it.
Like some people don't. I think I met a 135-year-old, my friend, who we watched WrestleMania, and we know it's a show, and we absolutely loved it, and we turned around like, I can't believe this is fake. He literally froze, and like, what do you mean it's fake? And like, dude, it's fake. Yeah, no, they're real athletes, and they're getting hurt here and there, but it's all
Right.
pre-planned.
Well,
And
it's
he's
just
like, what? What do you mean it's pre-planned? I'm like, oh my god. And this is like in 2010. The internet was readily available.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's like it's just like that. It is just a show, but it's still
Yeah,
very like athletically involved, like
absolutely. They
intense
they
show.
they get it. They do have to be very fit, and they do sometimes get
Yeah.
legitimately hurt.
Oh yeah. Welcome
So
in, everyone. We're talking
yes,
about the World
wrestling.
Wrestling Federation.
We
So,
will just say that we continue the conversation on from otters, because we were talking about otter wrestling, and then we went into there. But no, we didn't.
oh, there you go.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. And this week we're going to be continuing what we spoke about last week about whales and dolphins. We actually have some questions that are already pre-planned, but if you have any, obviously, again, you please post it in our YouTube and that. And of course, welcoming yet again the all popular, the all famous KP and Reiha. So yeah, let's get with our first question, and then everyone else can just follow on of what we're talking about. Oops.
Thanks for the follow, FNAF fan.
Ray, you got the questions there?
Your title still says.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna.
Yeah, I changed it.
I'm notorious for these things.
This is what
Like,
happens
it's not even,
when you mess with
it's-
technology.
Yeah, like JJ can never get his mic to work, and all of my shit is always messed up.
Yes. It's just it's never going to be right. Let's just admit it's never going to be right.
Yeah.
We plan ahead of time all the time, and nothing ever fucking goes.
Yeah. Well,
as
whatever.
planned,
I
so.
mean, it makes us endearing.
Yes.
Right, chat.
I'd like
chat?
I'd like to use that excuse. Yeah, chat, agree with us immediately.
Okay.
So on yours.
Anyway, yeah. Sorry, I obviously got a follow up from somebody who thought we were gonna play Jackbox, and that's not what we're doing right now. But I apologize.
That's something I used to play. One day we should do that again.
Yes. Let's play Jackbox at some point in time, but
Yes.
that time is not right now.
No, and then everyone can come join us again, and we'll do something fun. So let's just see. Hello, everyone. Hi, DeFi. It keeps multiplying, and the judges are multiplying. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with my face multiplying multiple times on the screen. There's enough meat to go around. But Ray, do you want to? Sorry for delaying. Do you want to start us off with the first
get
question?
Started. Okay, the first question is actually, do you have orcas off the coast of BC?
Yeah, we do. So we're really lucky to have enormous biodiversity off of our coast, and we do have orcas. And I've been really fortunate enough to go and see them off of our coast. But there are, well, first of all, I think we talked a little bit about this last time, or maybe not. Maybe this was in a different stream. But there are lots of different types of orcas. So there are a couple different types off the coast of BC. There's what were previously known as the transient orcas. I think they're called Biggs killer whales now. I'm not really sure. But anyway, they change their names all the time, you know. But
Yes.
those are like the mammal eaters who eat like the sea lions and other whales and stuff. And then
Wow.
there's the resident population, which also might be the Biggs one. I mean, one of the two is called Biggs killer whales. And they are actually struggling. They're actually critically endangered off of our coast, and it is really the only population that's kind of left. They're struggling because they are not finding enough salmon. They pretty much exclusively eat salmon, so unfortunately, like, killer whales have gotten really specialized in their diets, and when that happens, if your food source runs out, you're just pretty much out of luck. And then because their population started to decline, they now are incredibly inbred as well. So they're having like a really hard time having successful young. So we do have killer whales off of our coast. Sometimes you can see them even when you're just like down standing on the beach. You can see them swimming by, and it's really, really amazing. But it might not be that way for a long time. So
Unfortunately, and this is, and you
sorry
mentioned
to
that this
start with
is,
a downer, but
yeah, you mentioned that this is specifically because of the decrease in salmon population, or is.
yeah, that's what they think. And so there's been a lot of effort to increase the salmon population and like just increase its range and make sure that that there is enough salmon. Like really crack down on like when you are allowed to fish for salmon off of our coast, how much
Yes.
you're allowed to fish for, that sort of thing. There has been an enormous effort, and it has started helping, but it's so hard right now. Like they almost all of their calves die pretty much immediately after being born or within the first 2 years. And it's actually, you know, most whales and dolphins, they have got about a 50% chance of that calf making it past the 2 or 3 year mark. And that's just in general. So then when you add in like inbreeding and a like an issue with a food source, the killer whales off of our coast have a very poor chance of surviving into adulthood. So it's something that people are working on, and I think there's been a slight increase in their numbers, like 1 or 2 extra individuals, but we're talking about like a population that's literally only got like 20 to 30 individuals, period.
Wow.
So it's something that's hopefully gonna turn a corner here, but it's an uphill battle for sure.
So I think that we mentioned about the the responsible fishing, different organizations that are trying to help that. But I want to. Sorry for interrupting, Ray. I'll ask you my second question. But is this an just to pre-answer the question that's about to pop up? Is this the opportunity where something like captivity would help or wouldn't help in order to grow the population in any sort of fashion or way?
Yeah, that's really hard to say. I mean, so you would have to capture these animals, right? Like, because they are the last of their population, essentially. So if you wanted to, like, it's kind of like the effort that was made in like, have you guys heard about the vaquita?
Vaquita?
Tiny little porpoise off the coast of Mexico. It's the most endangered cetacean in the world, and I think there's only like 6 of them left or something horrible.
Oh gosh.
And there was an effort made to actually go. I was actually supposed to go. I was scheduled to go to take care of them because they were going to capture all the remaining vaquita and house them somewhere safe because they're getting caught in fishing nets. So it's a little bit of a different issue.
Yeah.
But they're getting caught in fishing nets. It's very dangerous for them out in the ocean. So they were going to house them in a protected sanctuary until such a time as enough of these nets were cleared and it was deemed safe. And it's just, it was a good idea, and perhaps just maybe not organized properly, but it is very stressful to capture these animals. So it has a high likelihood of failure, and that's sort of what happened. Is one vaquita did die during the capture process, and they basically just called the whole thing off. So
That's terrible.
So yeah, I mean, it's like you could put other killer whales off of the British Columbian coast, but those animals that are left out here are pretty much their own population. You know what I mean? So it's not really like, if there were other animals under human care, then maybe. But it's just, you would essentially have to. You could maybe something that is viable is like herding them into like a giant bay or something, and then
just keep them
blocking
there.
off the
Yeah.
bay. That's maybe. I mean, all these things are so expensive and so like. And again, I'm obviously wouldn't be involved in any of the decision making for any of these things. These are just like my ideas, like spitballing. I'm sure there's all kinds of like logistics involved in that kind of thing. There's also up here in Canada, we have very high respect for the indigenous populations, and they all have a say in what happens with these animals because they are basically their animals.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, and so so there's a little bit of that going on too. There's just so many cards at play. Like, hopefully, since they are starting to recover, there isn't a need for enormously drastic measures, but I know they were talking about things that would have to happen. There was actually a critically ill member of JPod a few years ago that the aquarium was potentially going to be. The government was trying to capture this animal to save it because it was very, very sick, and they were going to house it at the aquarium temporarily until it was nursed back to health. So there's definitely that sort of option, and that's where having facilities and having that option is a really great thing, and not just because like you don't even have to use the Vancouver Aquarium or any other aquarium as a facility, but what you use is your staff's experience. So the fact that we've had whales and dolphins in the past, we have staff that are experienced working with them, meant that we would be involved in that process because they would need us, because they don't know like nobody knows how to take care of a killer whale except for the people that have already done it. So so I mean that's where facilities are invaluable, and it is possible in the future, and they've been called upon in the past, and there's many instances where zoos and aquariums have stopped the extinction of animals. So
No, that's
yeah,
good. Yeah.
yeah, it's something that they could potentially be entertained, but it's like enormous logistics surrounding that especially when you're talking about such an iconic animal like a killer whale.
I'm assuming, especially now with COVID and finances, that might be an extra hurdle.
Yeah, I mean, we would have to rely on government funding for that. I mean, I
Yeah.
just can't. There'd be no way that the aquarium could shell out the millions of dollars that it would take. We don't even have two like quarters to rub together, so like so yeah, that stuff
Yes.
would have to come from the government and things like that. And yeah, and like you said, like everybody's strapped for money right now. It's not easy for anybody. So
Well, we have started this off with quite an informative and deep dive into that.
Interesting, and as usual,
Ray, what is the
Let's go
next
back to
question? Let's hope it's
go
light.
to
Well,
Beez's
our
biggest
next question is going to be pretty deep as well. The next question is it ethical to keep crustaceans in captivity, as they are pod animals in the wild, living in family groups? In captivity, are they housed singularly?
Yeah, so usually no. Usually at facilities you would not house these animals individually. And we're watching this is from the Georgia Aquarium. We're watching a beluga family on on our screen right now. Yeah, so the animals, it's one of those arguments where people are like they should be with their families. They literally are with their families. That's that's where they are, and most of these animals were born under human care. So so this is their home. These are their families. You can actually see we're looking at a mom and calf on our screen.
Yes.
And then this dude that just keeps swimming by, who's got like extra fat rolls, that's Emac. He's the dad in this situation. So I firmly believe in housing pretty much any species under human care if it's done properly. I think that it's an amazing tool, not only for science but also for people to understand these animals and get to know them. But obviously they do tend to be social animals, so it's not you have to take that into consideration for sure. So for instance, the situation at the aquarium right now being that we have one dolphin, which is a situation that's trying to be rectified, right? So these things don't happen overnight, but Helen is in the process of moving to a different facility to be with other dolphins. So that is something that we always look at. Helen too, it's really interesting. There are definitely like social whales and dolphins, but then kind of just like humans, there are not so social ones as well. Helen's never actually even liked other dolphins. I've spent a lot of time with Helen, and she like tries to avoid other dolphins if at all possible. But that doesn't mean that it's not good for her to go be with other dolphins, right? And so that's where the decision was made. Like, even though I actually think she's happier being on her own, and she's not really on her own, she's with us, and that's kind of the way that she seems to prefer it. It's still, that doesn't mean that it's not a good idea for her to go be with other dolphins, and it is a good idea, and that's why she's going. So yeah, I mean, it's a question that's really interesting. I just for me it's funny, like, where people choose to draw the line. Like, I don't understand why it's okay for some animals and not for others. So for me, you know, as long as you're doing right by the animal and you're taking into account that they, you know, the specific needs of the animal, then there isn't an animal
Yes.
that can't be housed at zoos and aquariums, as long as it's done right. So that's my opinion on the matter, and everybody has lots of different opinions, and people's opinions are all valid and things, and it's just, but yeah, just for me, like I having worked with these animals, they thrive under human care, and
Yes.
so yeah,
And they live longer, as you mentioned.
They do. They tend to live as long, if not longer, than animals out in the ocean. And there's also been studies. This was done on beluga whales, killer whales, and Atlantic bottlenose dolphins that tested the stress hormones. So you can get a blood sample and test cortisol levels in captive animals as opposed to animals out in the ocean, and it was almost 100% less in captive animals, the stress hormone. So that's a scientific number that is like directly linked to the stress that an animal is feeling, and animals out in the ocean seem to be feeling like at least 100% more stressed than
of course,
the
they're
animals.
constantly in danger.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on for them, right? And there's you know, and in zoos there's no predators, which is really nice. So
Yes.
so yeah, so I mean, this is a really, really deep question, and like I invite the debate, but yeah, that's my personal opinion on it. And I think that there's something also invaluable about seeing these guys in real life, in a way that you never ever would. Nobody's ever going to see a beluga whale, probably, unless you, especially not from an underwater viewing window, unless you are seeing it at a zoo or an aquarium.
But that is actually something I was going to raise in the next question, is how important it is for aquariums, because there's a lot of animals I wouldn't know existed unless I went to aquarium.
Yeah.
And then they had a little sign there. We've seen monster crabs, and I'm like, these things exist. Like, what? You know? But in relation to that, what is the balance between having these sort of animals under care and having a sort of format like SeaWorld, where it almost appears that they're purely there for the entertainment to do tricks? I'm going to use the word tricks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I think SeaWorld has not done well for a long time. I think SeaWorld has done a very, very good job in an enormous amount of areas, but not so much there. It's one thing that I wish that they would have gotten away, and they actually have. I mean, anybody who's been there in recent years, it's not really like that anymore. They do a lot more educational programming, but it's still, I think, needs work. And I think if they had gotten ahead of it and made that change before they were sort of forced to, it would have made a big difference for them. And I'm a big believer in educational programs. I don't like seeing animals jump through, you know, hoops and stuff like that. Look at this guy. This is Emac. I worked with this whale, this big dude right in the middle, and so he's just cracking me up.
He's so chunky.
He is. He was always a big chunky boy.
Looks like a Russian plane.
But yeah, I mean, so yeah, that's something that I don't, you know, sure, there's like entertainment value in watching these animals, and definitely it can be inspiring, but I think giving it an educational, putting like education first in your programming, is really important, not only for, like it gives the proper idea about these animals. I mean, like sometimes I feel like when you just do like these showy things, people are getting the wrong idea about the animals, and I don't know, about the relationships that the trainers have with them, and about, I don't know, so, like a lot of other things, and even, you know, kind of what we've talked about, where people are thinking that these animals would make great pets and stuff like that. Obviously, you don't really think that about a killer whale, but you know, but you might think that you might be out in the ocean kayaking and think, oh my gosh, I can jump in with this killer whale. Like, because people do, like, people are like going swimming and stuff like that, and it's insanity. And so yeah, I think that having educational programming and teaching people about these animals, while also inspiring them. Like I don't think that you don't have to get rid of entertaining to be educational. Like having the animals, asking the animals to jump and stuff, those are natural behaviors, and I think that's totally fine. But I think like maybe we could get rid of like the music and the dancing, like, you know. So,
and the whole flair of it is like
yeah, so I absolutely do agree. And I think that that was a big mistake that SeaWorld made, that may end up ultimately being the end of them. We'll see how they do financially and if they can turn things around. But you know, if they had just gotten ahead of this and been like, we're gonna go with educational programming, you know, whatever, we're gonna like
going to change our formats at least. Yeah, they had enough incidents to to know that, but I totally agree with you.
So yeah,
with that fact, because I mean the fact that I think showing enrichments, I mean how much have we? Someone actually mentioned here we all came here because of Joey, and we've seen the otters do enrichment, sort of little bring the balls back to the thing and tap the little paw, and you know it's not tricks. Yeah. But it's still very entertaining to watch.
Oh yeah, and like I mean, the most entertaining things, yeah, like you said, are just enrichment, which is just them doing natural behaviors. Yeah, absolutely. And there's ways to be entertaining without the animals having to do incredibly showy, unnatural behaviors. So that's been a big problem of mine with SeaWorld and facilities like SeaWorld for a long time. And I don't think it negates like all the good that they're doing, but it's certainly, I'm just like, you guys could be way ahead of the curve if we were just, you know, just stop dancing and get rid of the fireworks, please. Like, you know.
Ray, you got the question on your side.
Yep. On a much lighter note, this question is asking, what would be seen more often near the ocean to you, dolphins or porcupines?
Oh, is that from Beans again?
Beans, did you submit this, Beans?
I've never seen a porcupine here in BC. I saw a porcupine once in Colorado. So I would guess dolphins. Although I've actually never seen dolphins off of our coast here. I know we have Pacific white-sided dolphins.
Yes.
Which are like Helen off the coast. Bean says it wasn't them, so sus on Bean.
Gosh, even I can answer the question. Yeah, we've seen whales, more dolphins off our coast than I've ever seen a porcupine.
yeah, porcupines they're nocturnal, right?
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure they're solitary, so it'd be very tricky to see them. I've seen some cool things, guys. I've seen a minke whale, which I didn't know was a thing until I saw it. It's kind of like a really small baleen whale. And I've seen Dall's porpoise. Guys, Dall's porpoise are like the coolest. They're like these little black and white porpoises, and they love to sort of bow ride on boats.
Oh wow.
I've seen gray whales. I've seen, yeah. So I've seen a lot of things, but I haven't seen dolphins off of our coast, which is I'd love to see them. It's kind of a dream of mine. But I'm very careful about the whale watching companies that I go with now, though. I basically have one here in BC that I trust because I've been on whale watching boats where we get way too close to the animals. It makes me really uncomfortable. Because there's a fine line between like watching and harassing. So for me. So look at these goofy balloons.
Yeah, they're like bouncing and
so cute.
What is he doing?
It's so adorable. But anyway, so I would guess though it's still probably easier to see dolphins than it is to see a porcupine. Thank you for that question.
We got a
thank you next
question really from our side considering the porpoises. Did you swim already with those beluga whales for training reasons, or have you swam with any of these beluga whales here?
We don't swim with adult male beluga whales, and the only whale in the pod that we are actually actively watching that I worked with was an adult male. So I never swam with him, but I did work with him. There's a picture. Where did I post it? Oh, it's on my story on Instagram of me swimming with one of the beluga whales.
Ooh.
So it's on my Instagram story. It was like to just kind of advertise that we were doing this stream. I posted it earlier today. There you go. So So we did swim with the beluga whales. Usually, that was just for research purposes or also for diving. So we cleaned their habitat, and with the females and the calves that we had, we would just let them be in the area, and it could be pretty alarming. There was been a few times where I'd be like scrubbing something, and I'd be like, I feel like I'm being watched, and turn around and like a whale is right next to you, like ah! But they're just very curious animals, and they like to watch what you're doing. So so we did get in the water with them. It wasn't even though I loved doing it, it's also that water is like literally like 11 degrees Celsius. It is
Oh God.
like, horribly cold and not fun. So there's a line. So I didn't get to do it probably as often as I should have, just because I'm just like, I don't want to be cold. I'm such a wimp when it comes to cold.
And yet you live in Canada. Deal with the ocean.
Know, but I live in Vancouver. It's very different. It almost never gets cold enough to even snow in Vancouver. So yeah. I'm from Colorado though. I should be better, but I'm not. And then the porpoises, we did swim with the porpoises. Same reasons too. We would actually do plays with them sometimes, which was super fun, just swimming around and hanging out with them. And we could also do training sessions in the water and cleaning the pools. So yeah, I have had the opportunity to swim with the porpoises and our whales and stuff, and it's pretty awesome.
I'm noticing the way they're bobbing up and down.
Yeah, they're like little corks.
Yes.
It's so cute.
Then they let themselves float up.
They really seem to just do this kind of stuff for fun. I mean, it looks like fun.
It does look like fun. It's like that rush of floating back upwards.
Yeah, wee. Silly.
Ray, you got the next question on your side?
Yeah, so we had a question in chat. It was asking if you need a specific type of diver's license to work with certain animals.
Typically, if you work at a zoo or aquarium that has marine animals, you're working like around water, and you will possibly have to clean those habitats. Those places do I don't want to say require, but they strongly favor people who have an open water certification to dive. So so yeah, it's definitely, it's not necessarily like required, but it might as well be. Essentially, you have a much lower chance of getting hired if you do not have your diver's certificate. But a lot of places, if you're going to get in the water with animals, require swim tests. And so, like, for instance, I think, have we talked about this before? I swim test at several SeaWorld facilities multiple times, and their swim test is essentially the same as that of a Navy SEAL.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and so you have to get into this water. So it's the same, same temperature water. You're talking like 11 degrees Celsius, but you have to get in without a wetsuit. So you're just in like your bathing suit.
Huh.
Swim, what is it? 200 no, it would be like, yeah, like 200 meters just to the other side, just a normal swim, and then or one and back, and then do one full length of the pool completely underwater, so like a breath hold swim. Yeah, and then dive to the bottom, which is like about 30 feet down, to retrieve an item, and then a number of other things that you have to do. Needless to say, I never passed this swim test, although I tried. So it is, I just don't deal well with cold, primarily. But yeah, I was an atrocious swimmer. I've since gotten much better since working at the aquarium, because we do have to free dive for items. So like if anybody drops something into the pool, we might have to go swimming for it, and you don't have like gear or anything. You just got to jump in and go for it. So I've gotten a lot better, but yeah, the swim tests are pretty intense, and it's that way just in case something were to happen. You need to be a really darn good swimmer in order to to be safe in a lot of those situations. So so yeah, it is definitely a bonus to be a good swimmer.
Okay. A question from this side was a little bit off topic, but does Van Aqua have manatees? Do they only live in warm places? So are they not suitable for Vancouver? In other words.
Yeah, so they do they do need to be in warm water, and so it would be enormously expensive for us to house them, to heat the water. We do have some pools that are heated. Our dolphin habitat is heated to about 16 degrees Celsius, and some pools are chilled, but that is enormously expensive to do that. So to heat a pool to be suitable for manatees, when the air temperature outside is 4 degrees Celsius or whatever, would just be very, very difficult to do. So, so yeah, we don't house manatees. The Vancouver Aquarium also typically had made like an effort to only really house sort of native species to Canada. And so manatees not being one of them, it was never really like a focus. But yeah, I do not suspect that the Vancouver Aquarium will ever house manatees. Although manatees are super cute.
I think
As a side note,
that's the one where all the pirates thought were mermaids, which I still trying to figure out how. Aren't actually looking very nice today. What does your wife look like? It's like that's very bad. But yeah, VA keeping it real. Yeah, we can move on to your questions, Reiha.
Yep, our next question is, out of all of the cetaceans you've worked with, which was your favorite and why?
Good question. Oh, this is hard. I really did love the beluga whales. But I would probably have to say my favorite ever was Chester the false killer whale. Yeah. So we've kind of talked a little bit about Chester in the past, but I worked with a false killer whale named Chester. He was rescued when he was just like a few weeks old. And so like I was with him during his rehab and with him for when he was finally moved to the aquarium. And he's a really interesting, like it's a species that like almost nobody has had the opportunity to work with. And so that's super cool. And like just raising a baby whale or dolphin, whatever, is something that was super awesome. And it was just a really kind of charismatic species. Well, I guess I'm basing this off of after only knowing one of his particular species, but they're just really interesting animals. So probably Chester, but I do love the beluga whales. I miss their very cold hugs and kisses, like squishing a really cold wet marshmallow. Was really fun. So.
Shame. Oh, that's cute. Right, you can carry on your side, and I think it's come through for
Alrighty.
us.
Yep, the next question is tied into that one, but this one is, are there any cetaceans that you wouldn't want to work with?
Oh, that I wouldn't want to work with. Interesting. I don't know if I would like turn down working with any cetacean really. In like specifically, I have heard that Winter the dolphin at Clearwater Marine Aquarium, I don't know if anybody's heard of her, but like Winter's tail is kind of like a big movie that she was in because she has her tail was essentially amputated and she has a prosthetic tail. I hear that dolphin is mean. So maybe like specifically that dolphin sounds like she's kind of a jerk. But yeah, I don't think I would turn down any species. I don't think there's any. Like, I think it would probably be a huge pain in the butt if like anybody ever had like baleen whales. Like, I feel like that would be like a giant, like, pain in the butt to have to go like feed an animal that big. But other than that, no, I don't really think so. I think I wouldn't turn down the opportunity to do anything.
I was just about to ask, like, what would be the main hurdle with baleen whales? Is it just the feeding?
I think so. I honestly, I couldn't even really speculate, but I imagine that the feeding would be insane when you think of like how much those animals have to eat, and a lot of them eat like krill. So are you like really thawing out like hundreds of pounds of krill every single day? I don't know. So maybe maybe it would be. Maybe it's not that big a deal, but that seems like I'm thinking of the fish house, like the logistics of the fish preparation, and it's like giving me, fits. So that would be my guess, that it would be a big problem.
I would assume the krill would also need to be somewhat floating quite a bit in the water for the baleen to actually eat it, as opposed to floating down at the bottom.
I'm not sure.
I could be wrong.
Can you just dump it in their mouths?
Yeah,
like,
so.
what's the? I don't know. So, I don't know.
We need to ask a billionologist. I'm just making up words now.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh yeah, I'll send, just for the chat, I'll send a link about Winter. We have mentioned her before, but I'm assuming she's quite annoyed because she doesn't have a tail. It's a prosthetic. Thank you, human beings. Yeah, Reiha, you can move on to the next question, please.
Yeah. So the next question that we have here is, what characteristics defines a dolphin versus a whale?
Yeah. Okay. So, this is so complicated, guys. We've talked a little bit about this, but and it drives me crazy. So essentially, the nomenclature is that all dolphins are technically whales, but not all whales are dolphins.
God.
So when you look at the tree, you've got cetaceans, which encompasses all whales, dolphins, and porpoises. And then when you go down from there, I should have probably anticipated this and just brought up a chart. But then you've got toothed whales, which are things like dolphins. So all dolphins are included in the toothed whale category. So killer whales being included. So animals that have those teeth, as opposed to so those toothed whales. Then you've got baleen whales, which are what we were kind of just talking about, which are those like filter feeders. They've got those really big, like almost kind of like net-like teeth. So gray whales, humpback whales, blue whales, those guys are all baleen whales. And so then off of toothed whales, then you go, here's dolphins, here's actual like beluga whales and stuff like that are in a different category. Beluga whales are actually a true whale. I mean, to be honest with you, this is like, I've studied this and I don't even still understand it. And then you've got porpoises in that category as well. So the difference mostly is dentition. So, and this is true of a lot of things. This is also true of the difference between a porpoise and a whale, and the difference between beluga whales and, say, killer whales. So beluga whales, when you look inside their mouth, they almost have peg-shaped teeth. So they're essentially like cylinders, essentially. Without really much, like they don't go into a point. Whereas bottlenose dolphins and killer whales have those conical sort of shaped teeth. So those are the differences there. And then porpoises have the spade-shaped teeth, which are kind of like, I don't know, kind of like this. So essentially dentition is really the only way that you can truly tell. Because there are some dolphins that don't have dorsal fins. There are some whales that do have I mean, it's just so there are some things that tend to be true, but in all of them the dentition is a true, like, 100% way to tell exactly what you're looking at. But that of course doesn't help you, because if you're looking in the mouth of them, then you're just like, you're in the wrong place. You're probably you're probably done for. So yeah, but that's essentially the long and short of what the actual difference is.
Sounds like someone was just winging it in the past. That kind of looks like a dolphin, but
it really does.
It's as big as a whale.
Kind of, and then they were like, "This is a killer whale."
Yeah, but it's actually a dolphin.
No, it's not. And then so it was just, it's just definitely like taking steps back and trying to correct issues, and so. This
is a killer whale, but it's a dolphin, but a false killer whale dolphin, and then my brain explodes, because then it's not really a false killer whale. Oh my gosh, but it is a whale. Oh my word.
Yeah, exactly.
Just call it as you see it, people. Just support the animals. Because a beluga
Yeah.
whale just looks like a really chunky dolphin.
They do. They're like a dolphin, like wearing like a big heavy coat.
Yes. Okay, we move on to the next question, which Reiha has for us.
Yep, our next question actually is referring back to our previous AMA, and I believe this was when we were talking about sedating them. So what this is asking is an EEG for animals the same as with humans?
Yeah, yeah. It basically is the same. So we did EEGs with our beluga whales, and essentially we just sit there with them. We have like a false bottom to the pool that rises up, so the animals just sit there with us, and you just hook it up just like you would to a human. So it just like hooks up to bits of the skin, and it like is measuring electrical signals. And do that for a few minutes, and you've got a pretty accurate ECG. So yeah, it's essentially the same thing. There might be, I've never had one done as a human myself. Maybe there are some slight differences on what the probes are like, but essentially, yeah, it's the same thing.
I've had one done. I can say it's not fun, but it's not. It's more of a discomfort.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
technology's
I
hopefully
don't
been
know.
upgraded. Before they used to, as you said, to put the little clips, like just grabbing the end of your hair or the skull, but eventually you got a
Yeah,
cap that they plugged into just the cap. But
Oh, okay. We don't have a cute hat that we
yeah,
put-
I think it'll be quite a
No.
big hat.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't painful. It was just very uncomfortable. And I was a kid, so anything on my head that wasn't meant to be there would be
yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yes, Ray, you can continue.
Alrighty. Next question is, are whales the most expensive to feed because of quantity and size?
Mm.
Oh.
I guess it depends on what your definition of, like, it's. I don't actually know how much it costs to feed a killer whale. I imagine it's pretty expensive. But the most expensive animals by weight to feed are actually walruses.
Oh wow.
And walruses can be close to the size of a beluga whale, because and the second most expensive being the sea otter. So like one sea otter costs about $30,000 to $35,000 a year to feed, and walruses eat the same things as sea otters do. So they're more expensive because they eat things like clams and all that type of shellfish is very, very expensive. Whereas when you feed whales and dolphins, typically cetacean diets are pretty standardized across facilities, and they consist primarily of herring, and then capelin, which is kind of like a type of smelt, and then squid. And those items are typically pretty cheap to acquire. So the most expensive animal that I know to house in zoos or aquariums is a walrus. But I imagine that there's a lot of zoo animals that I don't know about. You know, they have to get like imported like crazy, I don't know, bamboo and stuff like that are probably very expensive too. But I mean, whales and dolphins do eat a lot, but they're eating a lot of some pretty readily available, pretty, you know, relatively cheap food. So not necessarily, you know, it depends more on what the animal's eating rather than the actual amount.
I think my follow-up question would that be is like, and would, in comparison to like a walrus and a sea otter, do the whales have to eat as many times per day as those other animals mentioned?
Yeah, so sea otters are a little bit different because sea otters do not have fat, or not very much fat at all. Typically, a sea otter has either between 0 to 2% body fat, so almost none.
In Joey's
they
case,
show a
5.
little bit of yeah, well, Joey's definitely, he's in the, like, you know, the 99th percentile for his age group. But yeah, so those animals are a little bit different. Most marine mammals have a really thick layer of fat. Obviously, we're watching beluga whales, so you get the idea. Animals that have enormous amounts of fat have a much higher cushion rate for how long they can go without food.
Okay.
And so sea otters' adaptation for staying warm is a really high metabolism. So they are just like burning food very, very quickly. And that is why sea otters need to be fed as many times a day as they do. We do 5, but you could even do more. I mean, typically like at least 4 is pretty standard at facilities, and that is specifically because of their metabolism. I've seen beluga whales a lot of times, like when they go into breeding mode, EMAC probably will not eat for like weeks, and that's totally fine. Yeah, and so that's pretty standard with the animals that have like a particular breeding season too, as they become uninterested in food in certain types of the year. So not necessarily. Like you could honestly get away with just feeding them once a day, or like if you really wanted to, like just feed them a whole bunch one day, not even the next day, a whole bunch the next. I mean, you really could do things like that. We typically don't, because we're trying to have relationships with the animals, build up on behaviors. We got a bunch of behaviors that we're working on and stuff like that. So we do like to space it out and come out to different sessions. But I mean, animals out in the ocean would often, come into some food and they'll just gorge themselves with as much as they can possibly hold, and then they may not find food for a long period of time after that. So they are well adapted to going without for long periods of time, but it's just not something that's really done under human care that often. And some of that's probably like anthropomorphism too, that we're like, oh, I can't go on coffee break until after I feed this group of animals, when really they're totally fine. They, what is an extra 30 minutes going to do for them? They can do a lot more. But yeah, so you don't really need to feed them as often as you definitely need to feed sea otters at regular intervals.
But I think that goes back to the mention of why it is such a thing that animals survive so much longer in human care, because they get that little bit of extra anxiety from the human side. Like, we gotta feed it now. I'm like, I'm fine. No, we're gonna feed you. Okay, I'm not gonna say no.
Well, and oftentimes, like for instance, the reason that in this picture, the reason that EMAC looks so big, maybe after this stream, I'll go check it out for anybody who wants to look at. But when he was at the Vancouver Aquarium, he tricked the people into thinking that he was hungry all the time, and he got to be about twice the size that he is right now. So the reason that he's got so many like rolls and stuff, we'll see him whenever the next time he's on the camera. I'll point him out to you. Normally the males are bigger, but he has an enormous amount of excess rolls, and it's because he went on a diet, because he got so big, guys. He looked like a giant water tick. It was really gross, because he would just eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, and they were like, he's hungry, we're gonna keep feeding him. Well, it's also not that good for them to get fat, so then he got put on a little bit of a program after that. But yeah, they're typically getting like way more food than they would ever be finding out in the ocean, for sure.
That explains the big rolls that we're seeing.
Yeah,
Here's a close-up right now.
Yeah, it's like he needs what is that, like that skin surgery, like after you lose a lot of weight, like he's definitely got some,
remove that extra fatty roll.
Yeah, but I mean that's the thing that we have to watch out for, because that's what they're adapted to do. They're like out in the ocean. That would be so beneficial to him, of just like, hey, there's food readily available here, I'm just gonna eat until I explode. And but under human care it doesn't make sense, because there's an infinite amount of food, so then you wind up with an enormously fat animal. So these guys are so funny today. Why are they just
they're like dancing on a camera, showing us their tails. It's like they know. Sure, I see some of the scars on some of the battle scars.
Yeah, and you can see that, but definitely go and Google beluga whales like out in the ocean, and they look awful.
Shame.
So you can definitely see some scratches and stuff, and those are primarily from other members of the pod. That's how they communicate. They will it's called rake marks. They'll let each other know, you're doing something wrong, or you're in my area.
Oh my god.
Back with all of his rules. So that's very, very normal. But if you look at animals that live out in the ocean, especially beluga whales, they are like, they're ugly. They're so horribly scarred and everything because they have to contend with icebergs and with predators and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely Google that because there's a pretty marked difference. Beluga whales under human care are so adorable and so cute, and then like you see the ones
And
out
shiny,
in the ocean, like
yes.
in between the icebergs, you're like, ah, what's wrong with it?
It's like Mad Max, they're wearing an eye patch they got there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we can move on to the next question, Reiha.
The next question that we have is, do you know how many false killer whales are in the wild?
Oh, in the wild. I honestly don't. I don't even know if they're endangered or anything like that. I don't think there's a lot known about the species. But and so that goes for me too. I know not a lot about the species as a whole. And we were doing a bunch of research with Chester when he was here, but yeah, I don't actually know. I know that they're off the coast of Hawaii. Reiha, have you ever seen one?
Reiha? I think she walked away while the question was being answered.
She gone.
She disappeared.
Anyway, they are off the coast of Hawaii, so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question, and I am not afraid to tell you I have no idea.
Well, that's honesty, and that's the thing. We want that kind of honesty, so we know what, and then we can move on. Has the time? This is actually a good question for the feeding of whales and even Vanaqua. Does the feeding times change for like daylight saving now? Does it affect the feeding of the whales and the otters?
Yeah, good question. I don't know about specifically whales. It just really it just changes. The animals are just gonna have to adapt to our new schedules. They don't really seem to care too much. They're usually up before the sun rises, and then they fall asleep before the sun sets, as you guys have probably seen. So they adapt very, very quickly to whatever we're doing. And so definitely like the first day after daylight saving, sometimes they're like, hey, what are you doing here? Like, shit, you're a little early. But it's not really, they don't observe daylight savings. Time,
of course not, yeah.
So it's mostly just us, kind of adapting them to our schedules, and they very quickly catch on. Pretty much anytime you show up with food, they're just going to be ready to eat.
Yes.
They know to eat when we're around. So. But yeah, it's a good question. It's sometimes it's funny, like the first day when you come in, like especially if you're coming in and it's now darker, and they're like, "What in the world are you doing?"
Yeah, it's like you're here.
They figure it out perfectly. Yeah.
Because I just imagine maybe the meeps get louder with the time difference. Like, hey, wait a minute, they're normally here an hour later.
He is quieting down. Somebody's asking. He is quieting down. He went through. So this is a training term. So I think what was happening when I was like, showing you guys videos of his like really like intense screaming and stuff like that, I think that was probably what we call an extinction burst. So this will happen with animals when you're trying to eliminate a behavior that they're doing. They will often do it like that behavior will often intensify before it then starts to decline. Because the animal's trying to like, oh my gosh, this isn't working, I'm just gonna do it louder and more, and see if that makes a difference. And then when that starts to not make a difference, they go, okay, forget about it, this isn't working. Same with like kids too, right? Like, yes. Rarely do you go, hey, can you knock it off? And the kid goes, sure thing, no problem. Usually they go, whatever, now I'm going to do it twice as much. And then when they get in trouble for that, that's when they go, oh, okay, never mind, that wasn't great. I'm
when they stop getting what they want.
So,
I think you mentioned about that ignore policy before. Just ignore them.
Yeah, the LRS, like the least reinforcing scenario. And I think that's pretty much the case. Like, Joey, like he was when I was coming into work, a few weeks ago, he would just be like just belting it out. Like I could hear him from the parking lot. And I don't really hear that anymore because I think he figured out like, man, I've been screaming from the top of my lungs every
Yes.
morning for the last week and nothing has changed. So, he's got to figure out something different to do. So, he's still meeping, but like at a nice, like I can deal with the meeps that we're getting right now. They're cute.
Yes, with the cute versions.
So yeah, maybe I'll try to get some footage for you guys this week because I do think it's finally happening.
Because it's the meeps and the
I don't want to
nays.
start like a
Yes.
rampage or anything, but I think that it's finally happening.
It will go viral if we start now sending the meeps when everyone knows that the meeps are actually coming to a close.
I
so to
know.
speak.
Yeah, maybe it'll go viral. Yeah.
Had a very quick question here. We're waiting for Ray. Have you ever worked with sharks before?
Oh, sharks. No. Short answer, no. We do have sharks at the Vancouver Aquarium, but I don't actually get to work with them. But I know people who've like trained sharks to do things.
What?
And it can be. Oh yeah, absolutely. Like train them to like swim into nets and like do like voluntary like injections and stuff like that. Like yeah, like you can do a lot. Like so it's super cool. Or like rays and stuff. I know people who've trained rays to do different things. So I've never had that opportunity, but it definitely is possible.
That's insane. It's like because aren't sharks technically giant fish?
They are. So they're chondrichthyes. So there's osteichthyes, which are like the bony fish, and then chondrichthyes, which are just like the cartilaginous fish. So yes, they are like a type of fish. But you can train fish too. You can train your goldfish.
I'm gonna Google.
You can train anything. Google it. I guarantee you'll find something. You can train anything with a brainstem.
I think that's our power, so to speak. Yeah, you've mentioned this actually before, which makes me want to go back in time when I first got my bearded dragon. But now now she doesn't get.
You can still train her.
She's going to brumation, so now it's just like, hey, look, I've got a toffee, and she's like, can I sleep?
Well, if she's turning herself off, then
yeah. There's an off button. Ray, are you back with us?
Yes, I am back. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we asked a
No
question
worries.
of. I totally forgot.
Yeah, I was asking if you had ever seen false killer whales, and then there was just silence, and we were like, she's gone. She's gone.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't think so. I do know that in the news here, we've had killer whales pass by, but it's more prominent to see humpback whales here and bottlenose dolphins
Yeah.
than anything else.
Right.
Oh, do we live in the same city? That's like identical. I wonder if it's two tropics. Yeah. See a lot of humpbacks.
I think humpbacks are more. I think they're just more common, man. I don't know. It feels like everybody's seen a humpback whale. Maybe not. I don't know.
I think they come here mostly to like birth,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then usually they travel away after that.
Yeah.
But well, speaking of birthing, our next question is how long do dolphin and whale calves stay with their mother?
Oh, that's a really good question. So, it depends largely on the species, because in some species they may never leave, but like maybe I'll just go with like how long do they normally nurse, and again there is a lot of variation on depending on the species, but typically around 2 to 3 years, which is also why which is also why I was kind of saying earlier that that it is the animal has about a 50 chance of making it past the 2 to 3 year mark, because there seems to be some sort of like during like the weaning process there's something happens because the animal's gonna have to like biologically go through a bit of a change, going from eating like almost exclusively milk to like being weaned off and eating exclusively fish and whatever else. So something seems to happen right around that age that makes it a very dangerous age for these animals. So like even when we have them under human care, and even when you're watching animals out in the ocean, once they're born, like you have like a couple weeks where you're pretty concerned about them, and then you don't have to really be concerned for a while. Not that you shouldn't be concerned, but that you're pretty much in the clear until about 2 to 3 years of age, and right around 2 to 3 years of age, you have to be worried again, because I don't know how else to explain it other than that, like, a lot of animals die around that 2 to 3 year age range. And even in scientific studies, most populations do not include whales and dolphins of that age group, because they're not scientifically significant, because they don't typically live past that age, or they have a high likelihood of not living past that age. So yeah, right around 2 to 3 year for cetaceans is when they're typically being weaned. I'm not really sure about this. Might be very different in baleen whales. Maybe they stay with mom for a lot longer. I'm not really sure. But then some animals like killer whales might stay with their moms for their entire lives, depending. Whereas beluga whales tend to live in very large groups, and they tend to be kind of fluid groups. So like if they pass another group, a whale might go, "Hey, look, I like the look of this," and just head off with them for a while. So there's not really like as structured of a family group as there is in like killer whales, who typically have a pretty strong family group that doesn't often change that much. Which is also why killer whales tend to be very inbred off of our coast when there aren't that many of them, because the males don't have too many other options. So so it can cause problems too. But yeah, so that kind of largely depends, but that's the ins and outs of what I know about that.
And is that danger that you mentioned for that 2 to 3 years, that also danger in captivity?
Yep. Yeah, it's the same. We get very worried at around 2 to 3 years of age, and that is typically where you'll see animals do pass away. And they do have the same statistical chance under human care, calves do, of surviving. So it is just about 50%. So it's very possible that in the future we might figure out something that helps, something that or figure out what exactly is going on that makes that such a dangerous time for them. But yeah, same odds as out in the ocean. You got about a 50-50 chance.
Okay. We hitting our 10 o'clock, but Ray, maybe you can end us off with those questions that you have on your side.
Yeah, we do actually have some pretty decent questions. There's about 5 questions left, but
yeah, I mean, well, I can stay on
Yeah,
too if
please
JJ
carry on.
needs to leave. That's not a big deal. But if he wants to stay too, no.
Yeah, carry on. I mean, you've got 5 questions, decent questions. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so our next question is, would increasing the genetic diversity for captured wild whales and dolphins be beneficial?
Genetic diversity is always beneficial. Yeah. So that's part of the reason why zoos and aquariums, like this group of, like I said, one of these whales is actually the Vancouver Aquariums whale, who literally just goes around. Like he's been to many different facilities. He was recently at SeaWorld San Antonio, and he goes all around the place, trying to improve genetic diversity around in the population, because and that's why zoos and aquariums share animals under the species survival plan, to try to have one giant captive population of whales, essentially, rather than 16 really tiny populations. So genetic diversity is never a bad thing, but it is definitely like a struggle with animals under human care, because there's also like so even though this big guy has been like traveling around, he's also one of the only really successful males. There have been other males that have been semi-successful, but this guy is like very prolific. So for whatever reason, so a lot of his genes are now present in the population, and so then that's why it has to be managed. There are animals that he is and is not allowed to breed with, and that's why he's moved around to different facilities. because like, so for instance, I don't actually exactly know, but I imagine he was moved away from San Antonio because he had already bred all those females. They probably brought in a different male, and are like, now we're going to mix it up and we're going to get some different genes going with these females, rather than just have him continue to pump out his own offspring in one area and have more EMAC. Yeah, he's a ladies' man, it's for sure. So yeah, genetic diversity is always super important, and when you get those like bottleneck situations. Here's whale poop, by the way, guys.
Yes,
Beluga whale poop.
the mist that's happened quite a bit, and it is a lot. It's like, calm down.
Yeah. Well, I look at the size of him.
Yeah.
So yeah. So yeah, when you get those bottleneck situations like what happened off of our coast with the killer whales, it is very hard to recover from those situations. But it is also why artificial insemination is used in facilities too, because sometimes it's not feasible to just move a whale around the world, and it's a lot easier to just move his little guys frozen in tubes around the world. So yeah, I mean, there's no bad things about genetic diversity.
You must think like, oh, I have children overseas and I didn't even have to do anything for it. It's like...
Yeah.
Just one last question from our chat, and we move on to this final 4 question. But do the, well, we can use beluga whales as an example. Do they have any vestigial organs?
Cool. Really cool question. So yeah, so right about here, there is an actual like little leg bone, not sticking out of the blubber. But if you did an X-ray, on whales and dolphins, you can typically see 2 tiny little vestigial legs connected to their hips. It serves absolutely no purpose, and it's on its way of being completely gone.
Oh my word!
But yeah, you can see that they were like on X-ray. You can see that they were land animals at one point in time. So I don't know if all cetaceans have that, but it's a lot of them do still have vestigial legs.
My mind has just been blown. So they still technically haven't done with evolution at all. They're like still.
No, I
they're
mean,
in phase
they're never
2.
going to be done.
Yeah,
who
they're
knows
never
what's
going
to happen next. But yeah, they haven't completed the process of becoming fully marine yet. They still have little legs.
That's so cool. Okay.
Tiny little beluga legs.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to Google that immediately after this. Ray, you can ask us other questions.
Yep, our next question is, in terms of size, how does the appropriate size habitat determine according to species?
Yeah, so a larger organization makes the recommendations for this, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and the what's called AMPA, which is the Alliance of Marine, or like Aquariums and Marine Mammal Alliance, something like that. Parks Alliance, I don't know. Anyway, they make recommendations for what they think is suitable, and I don't think there's any facility in North America that doesn't actually exceed those recommendations. But basically, it's kind of based on just what, like, it's almost kind of arbitrary, really, but it's essentially what they have deemed to be like kind of the magical number for what, like, the type of space that you need to have available for these animals. And a lot of times it's much more complicated than that. It's even like with beluga whales, you tend to also have some very shallow parts of the habitat, because beluga whales will actually spend a lot of time in shallow water in the Arctic. And they can actually swim backwards. They can unbeach themselves. They're a very unique species that way. So typically in beluga whale habitats, you need to have some sort of shallow area for them, lots of different things going on, and different areas for separating animals if need be, and stuff like that. So yeah, there's an overarching organization that has made all the recommendations for that, and those recommendations do change. They will they typically only get bigger, but yeah, it's basically just it's kind of just an arbitrary number, because there's no science that suggests that larger habitats are better. There's like there is a lot of science though that suggests that complexity of the habitat definitely is related to animal welfare. So having like a really natural habitat like they have here at Georgia, lots of different, I mean, we're only seeing a very small portion of it, as you can see, because sometimes there's not even any whales on our screen. And they can obviously go behind things and do different things. And you can see from their behavior that they're just doing different things all the time. I mean, they're playing around and just messing around. So like this to me is a very healthy and like, you know, happy group of animals. But this habitat, honestly, like it probably is large, but it might not be. I don't know how big it is. So, so you know, it could just be the size of this, and if the animals were behaving in that way, then that's a perfectly adequate habitat for them. So it's more. They did the study with elephants actually that just showed that there was no correlation between the size of the habitat and the welfare of the animals. So I assume that if it translates to elephants, it can be translated to just about anything. But we've kind of talked about that before. But it is very important to have very dynamic habitats, to have things always going on. It looks to me that these animals are looking around, like things are happening above the water, things are probably happening below the water, like lots of stuff's going on. And they've also got like a very large social group. I mean, I'm seeing at least probably like 6 animals in this pool, and there's you know, there's likely other animals in a different section of the aquarium. So that and having a really good enrichment program and having a really good training program is more important than having really, really large areas. Of course, we'd all love for the animals to have just enormous amounts of space, but it's not like necessary. They, even though that makes us kind of feel good, the animals can be just as happy as long as their habitat is really complex and interesting all the time.
Some with
If that makes sense.
Something that's that's actually, because you're talking about habitat size and things like that, and they might be hiding behind. But I'm also seeing inside this habitat, I could be losing my mind, but it's like bubbles are swimming. These little like objects.
These little like floaty things.
Yes.
I imagine this is just like little bits of debris and
just
stuff.
Getting caught in the current.
I imagine this is actually real ocean water. So there's, because just based on like they've got algae on the pool, so this is probably like legitimately ocean water, and so there's probably just debris, just like you would have out in the ocean. You know, just little bits of things floating around. But there are also, like at the Vancouver Aquarium, the beluga whale habitat had a it ended up not working after a while, which I guess you could have probably predicted, but it had like a button that the whales could push and it would start a bubble net from the bottom and like stuff like that. So yeah, so you can do really, really cool things and not have an enormous amount of space.
Yes.
And I think especially with social animals like this, like we see it with the otters, right? Like even though those are like 2 habitats that are, you know, maybe not as big as we would like them to be, you always see those animals having a great time because we've got a really interesting social dynamic and the ability to move them around. And things are always happening. So they, you know, it's a very clear, like, you know, very healthy, you know, positive experience for the animals, even though it's maybe not the biggest space that a sea otter's ever had. They're perfectly happy with, because they have a really complex and interesting space.
Yes. Okay. Right. How many? I don't know how many questions we had left. But carry on.
We have 2 left. So the next one is, why do some whales beach themselves even after being put back in the water?
Yeah. So this is we talked a little bit about this last time, I think, but like if this ever happens to you guys and you see a beached animal, don't put it back in the water. Like, you got to call the proper authorities because this happens so often off of our coast. I can't tell you the amount of baby harbor porpoises that have stranded that people have just like kind of tossed back out into the ocean, and then those animals just die like pretty much immediately, because they haven't just taken a wrong turn and gotten lost and wound up on dry land. Like there's something that is wrong with them typically. So an animal doesn't beach itself until it absolutely has to, and with these guys that typically means they're unable to swim for whatever reason. Could be any number of reasons. And so they beach themselves as a last-ditch effort to survive just a little bit longer because they can drown just like humans can if they can't swim. So there are some instances, like when you get mass strandings, that's probably just one animal that's really, really sick, and then everybody else is like, hey, what's up? Can we help you? And so that's a little bit different. When you've got like mass strandings, there you can probably save a large amount of those animals by pushing them out into the ocean, because it's probably just like 1 or 2 animals that's really, really ill and not going to be able to make it. But if you've just got one animal, there's something very wrong with that animal, and it needs the help of professionals. So yeah, it's been like very frustrating for me because there's been so many calls over the last few years of baby harbor porpoises that the aquarium has tried to go rescue, and then they're like, oh, don't worry, we threw it back into the ocean. And we're like, okay, well,
It's probably dead.
that's a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially because you don't know where its mom is. Like, these are like neonatal, cetaceans. So yeah. So the reason that they strand themselves is typically because something is very, very wrong, or they're following like a group. And in any case, like, professionals are needed to kind of assess the situation. And not to mention, it is actually illegal for you to really do anything, at least if you're in North America. You're not allowed to touch a cetacean or anything like that. So the best thing that you can do is like keep them, call the proper people, and you can keep them really really wet, but make sure you're not pouring water over their blowhole. That is where they breathe.
Yes.
So,
Oh my gosh.
and don't like throw wet towels over their blowhole either. So definitely keeping that blowhole area nice and dry, or waiting for them to take a breath and then splashing water over them.
Which is something you see so often with that towel thing as well.
Yeah, you can put towels over the rest of their bodies, but just don't put it over the blowhole. And then, yeah, don't push water in the nose. Yeah, exactly, Abby. And then just wait for the proper people to arrive and help you and stuff like that. And that's the best thing that you can do for the animal. But yeah, they're not probably ready to just be like kicked back out into the ocean.
They almost like seem to be asking for help from a professional.
Yeah. I mean, always. I mean, like, it's, yeah, we see it so often, and you want to feel like a hero, but you don't really know what you're doing, and it's much more likely that you do a lot more harm than good.
I almost feel like that is one of the most important things we've learned right now, because even me, I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
there's a reason.
Yeah, definitely, and there's no way that you could know that, but I think that's like, it's a very cool trait for humans to have, to go ahead and admit that they have no idea what the hell's going on and to ask for help.
Yes.
And I think it's something that's like, it's such a good quality for humans to have, is to ask for help when you need it. And definitely rehabilitation of a whale and dolphin is one of those cases.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, Reiha?
All right, so our last question, and this is actually going according to what we're talking about with the blowhole, is do you know the anatomy of the blowhole, and does that passage go directly to the lungs?
Yeah, the blowhole is super cool, but it's also really, really weird to look at. So essentially, as we're looking at these beluga whales, where that big bulbous thing is on their heads, that is not where their brain is, okay? So their brain is actually behind the blowhole, okay?
Okay.
So, yeah, so it's very, very strange. And the blowhole, I'm just talking about beluga whales because it does vary a little bit depending on species. The pathways for the trachea, so if you imagine, like, I need a beluga whale. Oh, I have one. Can you toss me that beluga whale, Stuffy?
We're about to get educated by Stuffy.
We're gonna do it. So here. Look here. Okay. So the brain is not here, but let's just say the blowhole is like right here. The brain is actually right here behind the blowhole. And then what happens is, like, they do go straight from the lungs, and then it divides into 2 areas that come around the skull, essentially, or around a part of the skull, and basically converge into this blowhole area up here. So when you're looking in, if you watch them open up their blowholes, you can actually see like a septum that sort of is divided right in the middle, just kind of like our nose, essentially. And yeah, and then there are two sort of what would be kind of like nasal passageways that then are sort of divide, go around certain other things like the brain and stuff that are up here, and then head into the lungs. So yeah, it is a direct path to the lungs, and it goes through something called the goose beak, which is kind of like we talked a little bit about this when we talked about sedation. But essentially, the goose beak can move back and forth between the esophagus and the trachea, but essentially they are not always connected. So the whale can sort of choose to connect them, especially. It seems like not all cetaceans can probably do this, but beluga whales can. Beluga whales can voluntarily move their goose beak, which is really, really interesting. And the reason that we know this is because beluga whales can take a breath of air, like from their blowhole, like normal, and then they can blow bubble rings. People have often seen beluga whales blow bubble rings. And you can actually Google this too. You guys, we should just have like a list of like things to Google, and we'll just like put that in the Discord afterwards. But you can, and maybe I'll just look at maybe we'll look at some footage after this, but they can blow very perfect bubble rings, but they blow them out of their mouths. So that's how we know that they're taking air that they're breathing in, switching up the goose beak, blowing it out their mouths. So super, super cool things that beluga whales can do. But yeah, so some animals can move it. We had Chester, the false killer whale. He used to eat fish, and then sometimes he would blow like fish skeletons like out of his blowhole.
Oh no!
Yeah, it was awful. It was the worst thing. And sometimes we had to like help him. He was just like a little baby, you know? I mean, it's just like a kid like jamming crayons up his nose and doing weird stuff. We used to sometimes have to help him get those pieces out of there because they're not supposed to be in there, and like sometimes he was being treated for respiratory issues because of this stupid habit that he had. But yeah, sometimes he would just blow like squid bits and stuff like, straight out of his blowhole. Yeah, it was disgusting.
I just see the worst scene of someone getting covered in that.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I once had this is probably way too much information, but he was a boy, and I find that all little boys are the same in this respect. And so like he would sometimes like turn upside down so that his like ventral side is at the surface and pee and essentially like chase you down the dock, like peeing at you. And you'd be like laughing, but also like seriously get the hell away from me.
Don't pee on me.
But and I once oh my gosh, we had an old she used to be a killer whale trainer. She came back, she now works as a teacher, and she was so excited she wanted to meet Chester, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'll take you to go meet him. And I put him in a ventral placenta so she could rub his belly, and he peed directly on her face, and I was like crying laughing on the dock, and she was so miserable. But yeah, all boys are the same, so
no matter where you are.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Human, every parent's been peed on by their boy, and I've been peed on by a false killer whale.
But not a lot of people can say that. There's difference.
No, it's true. There was a lot more volume.
So it's both worse and better at the same time. I got peed on by a whale, but there was a lot more of it. It's like pros and cons. Sure. That's the right way to end off. We started off very dark, and now we've ended off very light.
We ended with me being chased down the dock by a peeing
false killer whale
little boy. Yeah.
I thank God I put false killer whale, because I would have used it as a soundbite. Being chased down the road by a peeing little boy, like what?
Yeah, little boy, false killer whale. Yeah.
Okay, was that the last question? I think we had.
Yeah, that was the last question, and we made it.
We made it. Just
our topic next week is going to be on birds of prey.
Yes.
Which the form is ready to go if anyone wants to submit their questions.
Yeah, so anything about raptors and things like that. And you've had some experience with raptors, I believe. You've mentioned that before.
Yeah, I worked with this was many years ago, but I did work with a number of different kinds of owls, falcons, hawks, eagles. So I'm gonna brush up a little bit because it has been a little while. But we may just be learning like a bunch of things together because there's it's definitely I don't know as much about them as I know about whales, but we're gonna figure some things out together, I think. But I'll brush up on what I know.
No, that's excellent. I'm actually looking forward to that. So yes, I know we're always talking about marine mammals, but this is creature feature. So if you want to learn more about raptors like owls and all those cute little creatures, catch us again next week. I'm always asked this question. You going to be streaming after this?
Yeah, I'm gonna stream for a little bit after this, and maybe we'll look at some of those things like that we were talking about Googling. We'll Google them together.
We almost need a show just because I've written so many things here about Googling. Like we almost need to have that Google show.
We'll have another show called Google That.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you do that, I will be watching. So everyone submit on KP's Discord what you want to see her Google, so we can watch it all together.
But be
Animals.
reasonable.
Of
Be
animals.
reasonable.
Yes. Okay. Thanks very much for watching, and thank you for all joining. As you always know, the KP does release a little bit like parts of the videos every so often on her YouTube channel, and you can go see it on her Discord and my Discord as well. Videos automatically pop up. So yeah, if you missed the show, don't worry. There will be the best parts that are cut out by KP, and we're looking forward to them. But thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Reiha.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Off to KP stream.